On September 19, 1976, two of the most advanced fighter jets in the world were sent to intercept an object over Tehran. This is the declassified record. Both jets lost their instruments. One lost its weapons systems the moment it prepared to fire. The pilots reported everything returning the instant they turned away. I've read the report dozens of times. The line I keep returning to is simple. The objects seemed to know exactly what the pilots would do next. This isn't a rumor whispered at a conference. It's a Joint Chiefs of Staff report, routed to the White House, the CIA, the NSA, on the day it happened. No abduction, no missing time, no implants, just hardware, at the edge of Cold War aviation, going dark in the sky over a capital city. I'm not saying this happened the way they feared. I'm asking you to sit with what it would mean if the machine simply refused to let them fire. The man at the center is Parviz Jafari, a major in the Imperial Iranian Air Force, a squadron commander flying an F-4 Phantom II out of Shahroki Air Base. Jafari was not a mystic. He would later retire as a general. He was a disciplined interceptor pilot, trained to identify, engage, and eliminate threats in the dark. Beside him, in the back seat, First Lieutenant Jalal Demirian. His job was the radar and the missiles. Two men, one aircraft, one of the era's finest machines. Before them, another crew had already scrambled. Lieutenant Yadi Nazeri and his weapons officer sent up first into the same patch of restless sky. I keep picturing the ordinary parts: coffee going cold, a radio crackling at 2 in the morning. Nothing about that night was supposed to become history. And here is the thing: every instinct I have resists this story. I've been a skeptic my whole life, but the documents do not read like a fantasy. This was Iran under the Shah, a close American ally, its air force flying American jets, its skies watched by American technicians on the ground. So when instruments failed on those jets, it was not a curiosity. It was a potential humiliation for the most sophisticated hardware money could buy. It began, as these things do, with a phone call. Civilians in Tehran looking up, reporting a shining object hanging over the city, refusing to behave like a star. At least 4 civilians called in that early morning. A light, too bright, too low, too steady. The kind of thing you tell yourself you must have imagined. At the command post, someone had to decide: ignore it, or scramble a jet into the dark to chase a light that shouldn't be there. They chose to scramble. That single decision is why we have a paper record at all. Curiosity turned into an official military intercept. Naziri went up first. He climbed toward the light, closed the distance, and then, near Tehran, reported something no pilot wants to say. Everything had gone dead. Instruments, communications, gone. He turned back toward base, and as he retreated, he reported his systems flickering back to life, as if the object had let him go. Read it slowly and a pattern surfaces. Approach, and the machine fails. Withdraw, and the machine heals. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. One jet had already been turned away, so they sent a second. This time, a squadron commander. This time, a man who intended to finish it. Jafari and Demirian launched into the dark, vectored toward the object still hanging over Tehran. The first jet's failure was a warning nobody had time to heed. At 27 nautical miles, roughly 50 kilometers out, Demirian's radar caught it. A hard return. On the scope, its size compared to a Boeing tanker. Think about that, a radar signature the size of a refueling aircraft, hanging motionless in the night, waiting as 2 men in a fighter closed the distance. Jafari described it flashing with intense red, green, orange and blue lights, so bright, he said, that he could not make out the body underneath them at all. That detail unsettles me most. Not a saucer, not a shape, a wall of light so violent it erased its own outline, just brightness, and whatever wore it. Picture the cockpit, instrument glow, the hum of the engines, the tight discipline of an intercept. And ahead, a color that has no business at that altitude. The witnesses never mention warmth. It is a night intercept, canopy against thin cold air, adrenaline and altitude. The story lives in that thin, freezing dark. Jafari was trained to reduce everything to targets and range and closure. His whole craft was turning mystery into a firing solution. That is what makes his account matter. He pressed the intercept, closing on the lights. The object held, then began to move, always staying just ahead, always inside the edge of his reach. This is where the report earns its reputation. Whatever it was did not flee blindly. It moved as if it understood pursuit and chose to stay in front. Every account describes it the same way. The object mirrored the jet. He maneuvered. It answered. It behaved less like a light and more like an opponent. I'm not saying it was intelligent. I'm asking you to sit with a machine that kept perfect distance from a supersonic fighter for as long as it wanted to. Then Jafari reported something worse. A smaller, round object detached from the primary and came straight toward him. At high speed, almost, he said, like a missile. A trained interceptor pilot has one response to something inbound at high speed. You do not think. You reach for the weapon. You prepare to fire. Jafari moved to launch an AIM-9 Sidewinder, a heat-seeking missile, at the incoming object. This is the exact instant the case becomes something more than a light in the sky. In his own words, suddenly, nothing was working. The weapon's control panel was out. He lost all the instruments and the radio at the precise moment he chose to fire. Sit with the timing, not before, not after. The systems died as his hand moved to attack. That is the detail 40 years of skeptics have tried to bury. $1 billion interceptor and its pilot reduced to a passenger. No weapons, no radio, only the lights ahead and a small object still coming toward him. He broke away, and as he turned, the pattern held once more. Distance restored the machine. Instruments, radio, weapons, all crawling back to life. The jets were sent to end the encounter. Read the record honestly, and it is hard to escape it. The encounter ended the jets. As Jafari retreated, he looked left and saw the primary object still there, diamond-shaped now, and another bright object came out of it, heading straight toward the ground. He braced for an explosion. Every trained instinct told him something moving that fast into the earth ends in fire. He waited for the flash that would confirm it, but there was no blast. He said it seemed to slow and land gently, radiating a high, bright light on the ground. Descent without violence, control without a pilot. That is the sentence I cannot file away. Things that fall do not land gently. What descends and settles softly is not falling, it is arriving. There were no words that night, no message, no voice. And yet every man who flew reported the same impression. Something in that sky was aware of them. The failures were never random. Approach and you are switched off. Aim and you are disarmed. It felt, the pilots implied, like being read before you could act. And here the record blurs. Was the second object an attack, or an escort, a weapon, or a warning? The report itself never dares to decide. I keep returning to Jafari's calm. He does not sound like a man who saw a monster. He sounds like a man who realized he had been noticed. And it wasn't only the fighter. That night, a civilian airliner in the same airspace also reported communications trouble as the object moved through the sky. So the failure was not one faulty jet. It reached across aircraft, across crews, across purposes, as though the sky itself had briefly changed its rules. Imagine being chosen for that. Not abducted, not harmed, simply selected to witness that your finest weapons could be switched off at another's convenience. 4 crews went up across that night in some accounts. Each came back with the same hollow report. We saw it. We could not touch it. It let us leave. Realize is something they cannot undo. I don't think it would. And I think that might be exactly the problem they're trying to solve. Jafari brought his jet home. Systems restored, missiles unfired, tapes and testimony intact. He landed a decorated pilot who had just failed to do the one thing he was sent for. I wonder what those minutes on the ground were like, engines ticking as they cooled. Two men, unhurt, who both knew they had touched the edge of something. The next day, Jafari and Demirian flew by helicopter to the spot where the light seemed to land. They searched the ground for proof. They found nothing. The people in nearby houses offered only fragments, a loud noise in the night, a bright flash. Nobody had seen a craft. Nobody could point to a scar in the earth. Later, investigators noted a beeping transponder from an American C-141 aircraft found in the area, a tidy explanation offered for a place where nothing else was found. So the landing site gave up no wreckage, no burn, no metal. Whatever descended so gently left the ground exactly as it found it. That absence is its own kind of evidence. But the sky had left a trail on paper. That same day, an initial report of the incident was relayed to the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff. The document carried a routing and transmittal slip, the White House, the CIA, the NSA, the DIA. This was not filed and forgotten. It was pushed upward, fast. A Defense Intelligence Agency evaluation attached to the case rated its reliability high and called it an outstanding report, a rare phrase in that cautious language. Intelligence officers do not use the word outstanding lightly. It means credible sources, corroboration, and a case that could not simply be dismissed. And still, it went quiet. Because after the paperwork, the story did what these stories always do. It sank. For years, the record sat in files, unread, unexplained, waiting for someone to ask. It took the Freedom of Information Act, decades later, to pull these pages into daylight. The public did not see the report until long after the men had aged. And think of everyone the paper passed through, the controllers, the technicians, the analysts who stamped it, each a link in a chain, each eventually falling silent. Jafari spoke publicly only much later, an old man recounting a night from his youth. By then, memory and record were the only witnesses left standing. Consider the specifics. 27 miles of radar lock, 4 civilian callers, 2 failed jets, 1 gentle landing. Precise numbers, wrapped around a core no number can reach. And what of the raw data? The ground radar returns, the cockpit recordings, the tower logs. Some surface, some are described but never produced. The record has holes shaped like proof. This is the quiet tragedy of every real case. Not a cover-up in shadows. Just time, doing what time does. People die. Files migrate. Certainty erodes. The technicians who serviced those jets, the ones who could say whether the hardware was truly sound, scattered across decades and borders. Their first-hand word is mostly gone. One by one, the direct links thin out. The controllers retire. The analysts pass. The routing slip outlives nearly everyone whose hands once touched it. And so we arrive at the sentence, "I cannot soften." Nearly everyone who had direct access to the original events of that night is now dead. What remains is a stack of declassified pages, a few recorded interviews, and the memory of one old general. That is the whole inheritance of that night, which means the story now belongs to us, not to the men who flew it, to whoever reads the pages carefully enough to feel the cold of that cockpit. You would expect an event like this to reshape doctrine. 2 Allied jets neutralized in flight. Instead, officially, almost nothing changed. The silence itself is the story. Search the public record for a formal conclusion, a named cause, an accountable finding. You will not find it. There is a report, and then there is a void. To be fair, skeptics filled that void. Philip Klass argued the pilots saw Jupiter, and that a jet with a history of electrical faults simply failed on its own. Brian Dunning noted that night sat at the peak of 2 meteor showers. Falling lights, he argued, would not have been unusual in that sky at all. I take those arguments seriously. A tired crew, a known faulty jet, a celestial body, and a meteor. Stack the ordinary high enough, and the extraordinary can dissolve. And yet, the coincidence has to hold on multiple aircraft, across weapons systems, radios, and instruments, all failing at the instant a missile was armed. That is a heavy coincidence. What haunts me is a later impression Jafari described of the debriefs, that the questions were not really about what he saw, they were about what he would say. Sit with that distinction, not help us understand this, but let us settle on a version. They weren't asking what I saw, he felt. They were confirming what I'd say. That is how a real event becomes an official quiet. Not by hiding the paper, but by making sure no one in authority ever has to explain it out loud. And so the report drifts into the vast, dull archive of the unresolved, rated outstanding, then shelved, credible, then ignored. Present in the files, absent from the conversation. A faulty jet is a maintenance problem, a meteor is astronomy, both are safe, both let the institution close the folder and walk away without a single hard question. Nowhere, in the official aftermath, does anyone in power state plainly what the pilots lived. That their weapons were denied to them from the outside at the worst possible moment. Silence, I've come to believe, is rarely a conspiracy, it is a comfort. It is easier to say nothing than to admit you cannot explain your own sky, but the quiet has a price. It leaves the witnesses alone with it. Men who served, who flew, who reported honestly, and then watched their night become a footnote. For decades, that weight rested mostly on Jafari, a general carrying a story his own institution preferred not to finish, certain of what happened, unable to make it matter. A single pilot can be doubted. So the honest question is whether anyone, anywhere, ever described the same thing. The answer stretches across decades and continents. Nearly 20 years earlier, an American RB-47 over the southern United States reported an object pacing it, tracked on radar and by instruments, its signal seemingly aware of the plane. Same pattern. A machine tracked electronically, mirroring an aircraft, interacting with its systems, written down in 1957, long before Tehran, by a completely different air force, and a quieter account, unverified, from a cargo pilot over the Caspian in the 1980s. His radios died as a light held station off his wing, then healed when it left. He never reported it officially. He told it once, late in life, to family, the same shape of story. Approach, silence, withdraw, restoration, told by a man who'd never read the file. That is what unsettles me. These accounts predate the cultural template. Before the movies, before the internet, pilots on different continents were describing the same impossible courtesy, independent witnesses, different decades, different nations, no contact between them, and yet the core repeats. The instruments fail on approach. The instruments return on retreat. When strangers who never met describe the same specific behavior, a skeptic has two choices: coincidence stacked on coincidence, or something real that keeps behaving the same way. I'm not saying these cases prove each other, I'm saying they rhyme. Realize is something they cannot undo. I don't think it would. And I think that might be exactly the problem they're trying to solve. Notice what all the witnesses share. They were professionals, pilots, officers, crews, trained to observe, punished for exaggeration, the least likely people to invent a light in the sky. None of them wanted the story. It cost them credibility. It followed them for life. They reported it anyway, because the alternative was to lie about their own eyes. So the corroboration is not loud. It is a scatter of serious people, across time, quietly insisting on the same strange thing. The evidence suggests something we have not named. Which leaves me with the questions I cannot put down. If it was only a faulty jet, why did a second aircraft fail in the same sky? If it was only Jupiter, how did a planet detach a smaller object and send it racing toward a fighter at the speed of a missile? If the failures were coincidence, why did they arrive at the exact instant a trained pilot moved to fire and then vanish the moment he turned away? If it was a meteor, what meteor slows, descends, and lands gently, radiating light on the ground, instead of ending in the fire physics demands? If the case was truly nothing, why did the Defense Intelligence Agency rate it outstanding and route it to the highest offices in the American government? And if it was truly something, why has no one in authority, in 50 years, ever stood up and told us plainly what it was? How many pilots, in how many countries, are still not saying what happened because they watched what saying it cost the ones who did, and the one underneath all the others? What does it mean if the most advanced machines we ever built can be switched off, from the outside, at will? I keep coming back to that cockpit. 2 in the morning over Tehran, a young major, a wall of coloured light, a hand moving toward a weapon that will not answer. That instant contains everything: human intention meeting a limit it did not choose, the reach for control, and the quiet, total refusal of the machine to allow it. I don't think what he felt was fear, exactly. I think it was recognition. The sudden, cold understanding that the rules he flew by were not the only rules in the sky. There is a strange humility in the whole account. No panic in his voice, decades later. Just a man reporting, plainly, that he had met something he could not master. We are uncomfortable with that. We want the meteor, the faulty wire, the tidy folder. Anything but a night when our best jets became passengers in their own cockpits. But you can choose, instead, to simply look, to read the pages, hold the doubt, and still admit that something happened over Tehran that no one has fully explained. It happened in a specific world: Cold War allies, American jets, a watched sky, and into that hard, armored geometry, something drifted that answered to none of it. What lingers is the indifference of it. It did not attack. It did not flee. It let them come, denied them their weapons, and departed on its own gentle terms. For one night, the hunters became the observed. The interceptors were intercepted. And the most powerful thing in that sky felt no need to explain itself to us at all. Jafari lived long, and told the story to the end, calm and unwavering. Not a man selling wonder, a man who refused to unsay something true. Now the pages are ours, and the men are mostly gone. The routing slip outlived its authors. The record is all that stands between that night and forgetting. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Not the lights, the pattern. Approach and go dark, withdraw and come back. A machine that seemed to know us better than we knew it. I won't tell you what it was. I don't know. Anyone who claims certainty, in either direction, is selling you something the evidence cannot buy. The honest position is uncomfortable and small. Something real happened. It was documented at the highest level, and to this day, no explanation fully closes the file. I'm not saying this happened the way anyone fears. I'm asking you to sit with what it would mean if it did. That is all I have ever asked. Tonight, somewhere, jets are climbing into the dark, trusting instruments that have never failed them, as those 2 men trusted theirs, until the moment they simply stopped. I keep returning to the gentle landing, the light that did not fall, but arrived, and the young pilot watching it settle, learning that the sky was never only ours. The jets were sent to end the encounter. The encounter ended the jets, and half a century later, the only honest thing left to ask is the smallest one. What does that mean?